Hi, this is Raj, your host, Unleashing Talent, and welcome to another podcast. Today, we are going to talk about how great leaders create the right perspective for them. And this is about how we perceive. One is the natural way of perceiving something, another is an intentional way of perceiving something. So, there are two options you have in life when it comes to forming a perspective as a leader. Either you form perspective based on what you perceive, or at the first level itself, you control yourself and you take kind of a formal approach towards formation of a perspective which is intentional, which is deliberate. Let's understand six steps model of how we perceive it in a way that it has a value and that in turn helps you as a leader for your organizational capability building. So number one is that we perceive through our sense organs. When you look at things, when you read things, when you analyze things, when you confront things as a leader, you are with your people, with your business, with your customers, and you continue to perceive things, you continue to experience. Now, what happens at the next stage? Stage number two is processing. So, when you come across your customers, when you are working with your customers or your team or your strategy or whatever you are doing, after you perceive things, you start processing, right? And when you start processing, that processing is based on your own knowledge, skills, abilities, and capabilities. So remember, you might perceive something very, very big. Your ability to process requires you to have a very strong knowledge, skills, and capabilities. And number three is filtering. So once you perceive something, you start processing, and then the third stage is you filter, you understand what is important, what is not important, and you kind of bring forth the top 3 to 5 elements that are extremely important. And then at number four, you decide, you make a decision, you make a choice, and you finally decide that this is what I'm going to do, or these are the conclusions of this experience. So you perceive something, you process it, and then you filter information and you decide, you make a decision. Now, that decision at the next stage would reflect in your behavior, which is actually action, which is step number 5. So let me recapitulate. Number 1 is perceive. Number 2 is process. Number 3 is filter. Number 4 is the decision, or when you decide. And number 5, you take an action, and that is your behavior. And number 6 is the result of that behavior. Now, why am I talking these 6 steps model? There are 2 reasons for this. Number 1 is a natural way of perceiving things, processing information, filtering, and so on and so forth. And number 2 is an intentional and deliberate efforts to what you want to perceive. This is kind of a basic level of strategic leadership, and sometimes we will talk more about it. So when you have a reason and when you know the top 3 things, you start perceiving differently. And that's where I'm trying to make a very small difference. So as a leader, when you look at the organization, when you look at the team, when you look at your customer, or when you look at your market, you perceive based on your top 3 goals. And then your processing happens based on those 3 goals. And you filter information to extract the information that you need as a leader, and you then make a decision, and that decision is much better than the generic decision that you make based on a general perception and processing and filtering. And then you make an action, and that action could be two sides. One is on the leadership behavior side, or that action could be based on your market intelligence in terms of what you're going to do at the next level as a decision. Or at the behavior level, you understand things and you make a decision to behave differently, or you start making an effort towards behaving different. You create the perspective that you want to, rather than the perspective that's created based on the general perception. So that's where the difference is. When you start making deliberate efforts right at the perception level, you start making change, you start making difference. Great leaders create the right perspective through a 6 steps model. They perceive with intention and goals. They process information to accomplish their goals, and they filter that information to arrive at the right decision, and then they take actions on those decisions, and then there are results that they had perceived right in the beginning. So that's the power of controlling your perception. I hope this was helpful. I know this is a little bit of complex, but I'm sure you would pick it up the way you want it to be. Something that you like, you just pick up. If you don't like, just ignore. Get on to the next podcast. Thanks a lot for your time. Truly appreciate it.